Yo, what's up guys? The ultimate DokiDoki guide. So definitely a few added units in here altogether, but let's again start with all of the begin game. And in begin game is everything until hell. As mentioned before in the Terramaton guide, if you haven't checked it out, check out the other video. But let's look at what we have first of all. So in the very early game, you're probably still going to be throwing a Liana that it's totally fine, maybe up until Nightmare stage. You definitely want to replace her at a certain point, but it's definitely something that you could still work with, and it's kind of fine. It's not really the biggest of issues. Then in this case, you do need a unit that is good for the CC. So there's two good options out there, which is either the Kraken, and I kind of forgot her name, but the one with the hands, the one with the jazz hands, that one over there. She's really good for the sleeps and everything, and Kraken is, of course, really good for the pushbacks. Kraken did get a bit of a nerf, but if you put enough accuracy to him, he's still definitely fine for that job of just CC. Because in DokiDoki, the moment that you didn't place any CC, the bosses or the enemies just take less damage. Simple fact as that. So for that reason, it's recommended to go for that. Healer-wise, very early game, you're going to go for a Dorothy, but the moment you have any replacement, right away, go for the replacement. After 7 days, you're going to get the Linglo, and Linglo is by far the best for it in the first place. So that is pretty much the moment you can replace the Dorothy by Sanya, definitely go for it. The moment you get her, definitely go for it. You could use her as well. I haven't used her all too much myself, but I've seen other people do get decent effect with that as well. DPS-wise, however, there is a whole bunch of options, but pretty much anything that is not the red element will probably do good for you. If you go for the Tiamat route, definitely smacking the Tiamat over there. If you go for the Born route, take that one in there. If you go for Ro, put that one in there. If you go for the Rosa, put that one in there. If you put Romocha in there, it's the best in slot for it by a really long shot. Or you could go for some free-to-play route where you go for Rindium Bound, but you could also still put a Victor or the thing in there. In the early game, it doesn't really matter too much on the DPS slot. I would say anything can kind of work. Like, to be honest, like anything can kind of work. Buffer-wise, we once again could go for the number 41, but the moment you have a Shiaki the Echo, I would definitely go for that. Or if you have a Freya, I would go for that as well. I would probably focus myself on a Shiaki the Echo. And then you could go for debuffs still. So debuffs, I would say Grey is definitely your best in slot that you will probably have early on. And anyone will really kind of use that. Let's say that we have a team sitting like this. It is also totally fine to put Marvel in the DPS slot. But that's not necessarily Marvel in the DPS slot, but we have the Grey in the DPS slot. So if you put decent DPS to him, this could definitely be an early game team. Let's say that we actually put the full proper team in there. Something like this would definitely work, and then one of the two of these doesn't really matter too much. Also, this one could be in there, and wait, we have this one in there or this one in there. I think if you have something like this on an early game team, it's totally fine. If you don't really have a Marvel yet, but you have anything else that kind of works in there, just I would say for the DPS slot, kind of keep anything for the DPS slot. You'll probably get there. So let's look at the mid game. So this is where it gets a little bit more difficult, but still I would say DokiDoki is relatively easy the moment you have a Marvel. That's just the main thing. The moment you have Marvel, DokiDoki becomes super easy. It's definitely one of those units that's really worth to put some resources into. And then I would say, besides that, the team kind of remains the same. I would definitely still keep a DPS slot in there, but it's also one of those stages, personally, I didn't really mind to remove the buffer, and then I could go for the debuff in here / damage, and then I would still add in like another damage dealer in here. So something along this line. I wouldn't go a Tiamat as a solo healer, but if you go for a team like this, in the mid game, you're totally golden for that. Of course, you can put this one in there, or you can put that one in there, or you can put that one in there. Like, there's a lot of options. Also, if you happen to pull a Mio, which is probably by far the best in slot for these two. Like, if you do pull her, from what we've seen so far, she's absolutely insane. Did you focus on a close that you can also replace that for the one over there? Okay, I put him in the slot that's not buffer. Debuffer, and we use another one in there, so we don't really have this slot. Let's just keep it like that. So there's definitely a lot of options that you could work with what you could use in the mid-game. And I would say DokiDoki mid-game isn't that hard, but Inferno is definitely where it does get a bit harder. So let's talk about Inferno. So for the endgame Inferno teams, first of all, you're gonna need one of those two. It's absolutely a must. You're probably still going to be using a healer, and I think Linglo is going to be the best one for that by a long shot. And of course, you can still go for a Marvel. And then if you're full free to play, I think you have a difficult place in the damage slot to actually get like a proper damage dealer in there. Also, even if you go for a Tiamat in here, because Tiamat starts with a skill 3, she kind of kills herself, which is not really that recommended. So it becomes a little bit more difficult. And this is actually why you preferably have a Romocha. Romocha will do insanely good in here, and she will do a lot of work for you to just make this a lot easier of a dungeon. If you don't have that, I think second best option is probably the Rahu or a Born. I think that those are pretty good as well, but if you don't have neither of those, then Rosa will probably do your job there as well. Then if you do happen to get a Mio, I think Mio by a really landslide is going to make DokiDoki Inferno super easy, like incredibly easy. I would still keep the Grey for the debuffer. I would still keep you while you're both debuffers. And then you're not really working with too much of a buffer. Let's say that you go for a super endgame build where you just have like all units, super maxed out, everything like that. I would probably work more towards something where you would go for a Marvel next to this. So we have the Marvel in... Oh, wait, Marvel was already sitting in that slot. So we have 4 units over here. Then we just need 1 more unit, and then you would go for a simple buffing unit, something along the lines of this, or something along the lines of this. Also, anywhere where I placed any of the buffer units before, you can place in a Lily to just boost up your damage dealer. So I would say that you would use both of them as debuffers over here. You would use any of these 2 for the final team, and then you would use this as DPS and this as the same unit, and then you don't go for any healer. If your whole team is on the Codex of Magic, and you have her to one-shot waves, then you can go for this kind of team. If you don't have that right away, then it might be better to not go for a team that is that heavy on it, where I would rather say it's like, okay, still put the healer in here. So you still go for those 2 units, you still go for the DPS, so you go for the healer, and then you, of course, go for the CC unit. But if you manage to get a 1-turn snipe in for the whole team with your Romocha, and Romocha is probably the only one that can actually properly do that. A Messiah is definitely not going to be able to do that, unless you have really insane gear, which I don't really expect people to have anytime soon. Then that is kind of the workaround that you would have to be focusing on your first few stages for Inferno. Inferno on this one is not crazy hard, but it is definitely something that you have to get the right amount of CC units. You have to pretty much get the right units where it just becomes a lot easier. And I think that she is probably the best option for you for the for that slot itself. And then for damage dealers, you kind of want to be having that Romocha. If you don't have a Romocha, I would probably go for Rahu. Or, well, Tiamat, as mentioned, is a little bit on the tricky side because Tiamat kind of messes up your... or messes up her own HP. Would be nice if she starts off with a skill 2, or you can set it up to start off with a skill 2, because if she started with a skill 2, she goes for a massive shield. She is more of a healer than a full DPS type, so she becomes more of this slot rather than this slot. But since she always starts with a skill 3, she's more of a DPS slot, which you don't really want to have over there. So if she would be possible to be a more of a sustainer healer and you want to go for a very safe route, just long matches altogether, then probably something like this. Also, Lilith, I actually didn't take her in. Lilith is definitely great on that CC slot as well. So something along the lines of a team like this, of 5, will probably take it down, but it will take a very long time. But it is really depending on the Tiamat if she actually does her proper skill at the proper timing. Because if you manual this and you start with a skill 2 rather than a skill 3, then it's probably a lot better for the rotation for her altogether. And that's maybe something that you have to do at the start for a little bit to actually get her stuff just in. But Inferno in here, it is on one side not that hard, but on the other side you do have to get the right units in, and that might take some time. And of course, if you want to be following how I will be clearing those stages, you gotta follow the channel. I will be making daily videos the moment that the game is released, and I'll be also daily streaming on Twitch. If you haven't checked the other videos for the Aurora, which is coming after this one, or the Terramaton, which is coming before this one, check those out as well, and see you as always in the next one.
Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more guides, join the Discord and check out the content tab for the guide video archive, which contains all of the guides that you might need. Hope to see you there.